The steady rhythm of the oxygen machine had become the soundtrack of my survival, a soft hiss and hum that kept me tethered to life. Every breath I took was borrowed time, gifted by technology and sustained by trust. I had grown used to the mechanical comfort of it, the faint green light blinking beside my bed, the gentle pulse that meant I was still here. But that morning, the sound stopped. At first, I thought it was just a glitch. Machines failed all the time in hospitals. Maybe a loose wire, maybe power fluctuation. I blinked twice, trying to adjust to the sudden stillness, to the silence that pressed down like a weight. Then I tried to inhale, and nothing came. My lungs screamed for air. The hiss that had always been there was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. Panic clawed up my throat. My fingers trembled as I reached for the emergency button on the bedside panel, but even that motion felt like dragging my arm through thick syrup. The world tilted. My vision blurred, edges dimming. Through the haze, I saw her. Karen, the day nurse. Mid-40s, square shoulders, always carrying that look of tired authority. She stood by the corner of my bed, her face calm, too calm, as if she had just finished some unpleasant but necessary task. Her hand still rested on the oxygen valve. The tube connecting me to the machine dangled lifelessly. "Karen," I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. My throat felt like sandpaper. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at me, eyes flat, emotionless, calculating. Then she muttered, "You don't need this much oxygen. Doctor said you're stable. It's better to wean you off gradually." I couldn't even form a reply. My chest burned as I tried to breathe, but nothing entered. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, faster, louder. I pounded the bed rail weakly, gasping. "Karen, turn it back on." For a moment, she hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. "You'll be fine," she said curtly, and walked away. That was when I realized, this wasn't a mistake. The seconds stretched like hours. My world shrank to a tunnel of noise, heart monitor beeping in panic, my body trembling as every cell screamed for oxygen. I reached for the mask, trying to reconnect the tube, but my strength was fading fast. Black spots danced across my vision. And then, just before the darkness swallowed everything, I heard the door slam. Someone else had entered the room, maybe another nurse, maybe my daughter Emily. A shout cut through the air, followed by footsteps rushing toward me. The hiss of the oxygen returned, like a dying heartbeat suddenly revived. I sucked in a breath so sharp it hurt. My lungs burned, my eyes watered, but I was alive. Barely. When I opened my eyes again, I was surrounded by chaos. Two nurses were shouting over each other, one adjusting the oxygen settings while another checked the monitors. And there she was again, Karen, standing frozen near the door, her arms crossed, face pale. "What happened here?" a male nurse demanded. "System error," Karen said quickly. "The valve was loose. It must have disconnected." I wanted to speak, to tell them the truth, but my voice came out as a faint rasp. She turned it off." The room fell silent. Everyone turned to look at her. Karen's eyes darted toward me, then back at the others. "That's absurd," she said, forcing a smile. His confused. "Hypoxia causes hallucinations, you know that." But the other nurse wasn't convinced. "The lock valve doesn't open on its own," she said sharply. "You need a key to twist it off." For a split second, Karen's composure cracked. Then she turned and walked out. That was the last I saw of her that morning. Later, after the crisis had passed, I lay in bed trembling, an oxygen mask strapped tightly over my face. My daughter Emily sat beside me, her hand clutching mine. Her eyes were red, from crying or from anger, I couldn't tell. "Dad," she whispered, "what happened?" "The doctors said someone tampered with your tank." "It was Karen," I managed to say. "She turned it off." She looked right at me. Emily's lips parted in shock. That's attempted murder." "I don't know why," I said weakly. "Maybe she thought she was helping. Maybe she just..." My voice broke. I don't know. Emily stood abruptly, jaw tight. I'll find out. I swear I will. That night, when the hallway lights dimmed and the nurses' voices faded, I couldn't sleep. My mind replayed every second, her hand on the valve, her blank stare, the suffocating silence. There was something behind her calmness, something more than negligence. And deep down, I felt it, this wasn't over. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds of my hospital room, painting pale stripes across the white sheets. The world felt distant, muffled, as though I were looking at it through glass. I could still feel the phantom pressure of that suffocating silence from the day before. Every breath I took now felt like a borrowed miracle. Emily hadn't left my side. She had spent the night in the recliner next to my bed, refusing to sleep. Her face was pale from exhaustion, but her eyes burned with determination. When the door opened and Dr. Henson entered, clipboard in hand, Emily straightened instantly. "Doctor," she said before he could speak. "Has anyone spoken to Karen?" The doctor hesitated, his tone cautious. "We're handling it internally. I've filed a report with hospital administration. They're reviewing the surveillance footage." "Reviewing?" Emily snapped. "My father almost died." I reached over and squeezed her hand weakly. "Emily, it's okay," I whispered. "Let them handle it." But deep down, I wasn't sure it was okay. Dr. Henson sighed. "Look, the hospital has procedures. If the investigation proves Karen was negligent, she'll face disciplinary action. But until then, she's been suspended." "Suspended?" Emily's voice dripped with disbelief. "She should be arrested." The doctor shifted uncomfortably. "Let's not jump to conclusions. Sometimes people make mistakes." "Mistakes don't involve turning off oxygen tanks," Emily said coldly. "That's intent." The doctor didn't reply. He gave me a sympathetic nod and left the room. As soon as he was gone, Emily turned to me. "Dad, I'm not letting this go. I talked to one of the nurses last night, the younger one, Chloe. She said Karen's been acting strange lately. Short-tempered, paranoid. She's even had arguments with other staff about overusing hospital resources." I frowned. "Overusing?" "Yeah. Apparently she thinks too many patients are being kept alive on machines. She called it unnatural." A chill ran down my spine. "That's not just strange," I said slowly. "That's dangerous thinking." Emily nodded grimly. "I'm calling the police." 2 officers arrived later that afternoon, a tall, broad-shouldered man named Detective Harris and his partner, a sharp-eyed woman named Detective Vega. They spoke softly, professionally, but their eyes carried that trained alertness that never really switched off. Detective Vega started first. "Mr. Walters, can you describe what happened yesterday, in your own words?" I told them everything, the silence, the missing hiss, the sight of Karen's hand on the valve, her calm denial. By the time I finished, my throat was dry and Emily's eyes were glistening with tears. Harris nodded slowly. "And you're certain she intentionally turned it off?" "As certain as I am that I almost died," I said quietly. Vega jotted something down. "Do you know if you had any disagreements with her? Anything personal?" "No. She was always distant, but not unkind. Until that moment." The detectives exchanged a glance. Then Vega closed her notebook. "We've already requested the surveillance footage from your ward. If it corroborates your statement, this moves from negligence to potential criminal intent." Emily exhaled sharply, almost in relief. Finally, someone's taking this seriously. By evening, the hospital was buzzing with rumors. Nurses whispered in corridors, patients murmured behind half-closed curtains. Karen's name floated through the air like static. "She did what? They say she turned off his oxygen, she's in trouble now." Chloe, the young nurse Emily had mentioned, came by my room during the night shift. She looked nervous, her hands twisting around her ID badge. "Mr. Walters," she said softly, glancing around before stepping closer. "I probably shouldn't say this, but I think you were right about Karen." My pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" She's been obsessed lately. Keeps talking about how hospitals are wasting money keeping people on life support. She said, sometimes mercy looks cruel. Chloe swallowed hard. Yesterday morning, before your oxygen was cut, I saw her checking your chart, twice. She wasn't even assigned to you that day. Emily's head snapped up. So she planned it. I don't know, Chloe whispered. But she said something that chilled me. She said, some people are just clinging to air they no longer deserve. Emily froze. My skin crawled. Before I could respond, the door opened, Detective Harris again. His expression was tight. We've just reviewed the footage, he said grimly. Emily rose. And? He exhaled. It shows Karen entering your room at 9:02 a.m. She stands beside your bed for about 30 seconds, reaches down to the oxygen regulator, and turns the valve. The machine stops. She watches you for 10 seconds, then walks out. The silence that followed was deafening. She didn't even hesitate, Vega added quietly. No sign of panic or confusion. That's not an accident. Emily's voice trembled with fury. So what happens now? She's been taken into custody, Harris said. Charged with endangering life through criminal negligence, possibly upgraded to attempted homicide depending on your statement and medical reports. I sank back into my pillow, a flood of emotions crashing through me, relief, fear, disbelief. The woman who had smiled politely while changing my four had nearly killed me. But as the night deepened and the adrenaline faded, something began to gnaw at me. Why had she done it to me? I wasn't terminal. I wasn't on life support. I was recovering. There had to be more. At around 2 a.m., unable to sleep, I turned on the bedside TV for noise. Local news was running, and then her face appeared on the screen. Local nurse arrested for endangering patient's life, the anchor said. Karen's mugshot flashed briefly, the same calm face, now framed by harsh lighting and a cold expression. But what came next froze me entirely. Authorities are investigating possible links between Karen's case and 2 previous incidents at St. Mercy Hospital, both involving patients who suffered sudden oxygen supply failures under her supervision. I felt my heart stop. This wasn't her first time. By dawn, I knew one thing for certain: Karen hadn't just made a mistake. She had made a choice. And I was lucky to be alive to tell the story. Karen sat in the small, gray interrogation room of the precinct, her wrists cuffed lightly on the metal table. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, humming like angry bees. She hadn't said a word since her arrest. Her posture was calm, almost regal, as if she believed she had done nothing wrong. Detective Vega watched her through the two-way glass. She's not showing remorse, she muttered to Harris. Harris crossed his arms. Some people convince themselves they're right, even when they've done something unforgivable. Vega nodded toward the observation monitor. The hospital records show something strange. Karen's husband died 3 years ago. Respiratory failure. He was on oxygen support. Let me guess, Harris said grimly. She turned his off too? No, Vega said. He refused treatment. He begged her to stop the machines. He suffered for months, and she couldn't bring herself to help him. Harris's eyes narrowed. So now she's trying to correct that guilt by deciding who should live and who shouldn't. Maybe, Vega said. But that's not her choice to make. Back at the hospital, I was slowly regaining my strength. The oxygen mask had been replaced by nasal tubes, and I could sit up without feeling dizzy. Emily had brought me coffee, though it sat untouched. My thoughts were too heavy to drink it. The door opened quietly, and Detective Harris stepped in. He looked tired but alert, his notepad tucked under his arm. Mr. Walters, he began, we've learned more about Karen. Emily looked up immediately. What did you find? Harris took a deep breath. Her husband, Daniel Marks, was a chronic lung patient. End-stage COPD. She watched him die slowly. There were complications. He was begging for mercy at the end, but doctors kept him alive. After that, she became obsessed with the ethics of prolonged life support. So she thinks she's doing people a favor by ending their treatment. Emily asked in disbelief. In her mind, yes, Harris said. We found online posts under her name, medical ethics forums, euthanasia debates. She wrote that modern medicine has become a cruel machine keeping souls trapped in suffering. I shuddered. She called it mercy. She called it justice, Harris corrected. And you were her next case. Emily stood up, her fists clenched. She could have killed my father. That's not mercy, that's murder. Harris nodded solemnly. That's why the charges are being upgraded to attempted homicide. The DA agrees this wasn't negligence, it was deliberate. He paused. But she's not fighting the arrest. She says she's proud of what she did. Later that evening, when the ward was quiet and visiting hours had ended, I couldn't stop thinking about her, Karen Marks, the woman who had nearly ended my life and somehow believed it was an act of compassion. I remembered her steady hands when she changed my 4 bags, the way she hummed softly under her breath while adjusting the bed angle. She had always seemed so composed, so capable. How could someone so calm harbor such twisted beliefs? Sleep refused to come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, detached, unfeeling, but not evil. There had been something haunted in her expression that last time I saw her. Around midnight, I turned on the television again. A local reporter stood outside the precinct, her voice solemn. Karen Marks, a registered nurse at St. Mercy Hospital, is under investigation for multiple incidents of deliberate equipment tampering. Police sources confirm at least 2 previous patient deaths under suspicious circumstances may be linked to her. The words hit me like a punch. 2 deaths. My mind raced. If I hadn't survived, I would have been the 3rd, just another quiet tragedy, written off as a machine failure. I felt a rush of anger. But beneath that, something else stirred, pity. What must have broken inside her to believe she had the right to decide who lives and who dies? 2 days later, Detective Vega requested my presence at the station to record a formal statement. I hesitated at first. Hospitals made me feel safe now, police stations didn't. But Emily insisted on coming with me. When we arrived, Vega greeted us kindly. Karen's requested to see you, she said quietly. She says she wants to explain. My first instinct was to refuse. But curiosity, or perhaps closure, pulled me in. They led me to the same gray room I'd seen on TV. Karen sat there, still in the same beige prison jumpsuit. Her hair was tied back, her expression strangely serene. When she looked at me, I saw no hatred, just conviction. Mr. Walters, she said softly, I didn't want you to suffer. You were tethered to that machine, gasping every day. I thought I was freeing you. My throat tightened. Freeing me? You almost killed me. Her eyes didn't waver. You don't understand. I watched my husband die, slowly, painfully. Every breath a fight. I begged the doctors to let him go, but they wouldn't. I had to watch him choke on his own lungs. After he died, I swore I'd never let anyone else suffer that way again. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, my voice trembling. You played God. Karen smiled faintly, a broken, weary smile. Someone has to. I stared at her, searching for remorse, for even a hint of doubt. But there was none. The guard escorted me out moments later. As the door shut behind me, I heard her whisper, "You'll thank me one day." In the car, Emily was silent for a long time. Finally, she said, "She's insane." I nodded slowly. Maybe. But she believed she was doing good. Emily's voice cracked. That's what makes it worse. That night, back in my hospital bed, I couldn't sleep again. The words echoed in my mind, "You'll thank me one day." I didn't know whether to feel fear or sorrow. All I knew was that her face, calm, convinced, and unrepentant, would haunt me for the rest of my life. The courthouse smelled of varnished wood and stale air, the kind of place where lives were weighed and judged. I sat in the second row, Emily beside me, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. It had been 6 months since that morning in the hospital, but I still carried it with me, every hiss of oxygen, every echo of silence, every flicker of panic that lived in the corners of my mind. Karen Marks sat across the room, her wrists free now, dressed neatly in a gray suit. She looked nothing like a criminal, calm, collected, even graceful. But the moment I looked into her eyes, I saw the same haunting certainty that had nearly ended my life. The judge entered, and the murmur in the room died instantly. "Court is now in session," the bailiff announced. The prosecution began first. Assistant District Attorney Miller rose, tall and commanding. "Your Honor, this case is not about medical error. It's about moral corruption disguised as mercy," he said, his voice echoing through the hall. The defendant, Nurse Karen Marks, deliberately disconnected a patient's oxygen supply, fully aware that doing so could cause death. This was not negligence. This was intent. He turned toward me briefly. "Mr. Walters survived. 2 others did not." The room stirred. My breath caught in my chest. Then Karen's defense attorney stood, a small, nervous man with silver glasses. "Your Honor," he began, "my client is not a monster. She is a woman broken by grief and guilt. She acted under a delusion that she was sparing her patients from suffering. This is a tragedy, not a crime." I felt a surge of anger, but also pity. Both could coexist, I realized. The trial dragged on for weeks. Doctors testified, showing the records of the other 2 patients. Both had suffered sudden oxygen loss while under Karen's care. Both cases were dismissed at the time as equipment failure. Then came Chloe, the young nurse. She spoke with trembling hands. "Karen used to say we were keeping people alive against God's will," she told the court. "I didn't think she meant it literally." The courtroom gasped. When it was my turn, my legs shook as I walked to the witness stand. I felt every pair of eyes on me. The oxygen tube under my nose felt heavier than ever. The prosecutor nodded gently. "Mr. Walters, can you describe what you remember from that day?" I swallowed hard. I remember silence. I remember trying to breathe and failing. I remember looking at her, and realizing she had decided I didn't deserve air. The courtroom went still. The defense attorney rose. "Mr. Walters," he said carefully, "is it possible you misunderstood her intent? Could she have thought she was following medical advice?" I looked him dead in the eye. She watched me suffocate and walked away. "That's not misunderstanding. That's choice." Karen remained silent throughout most of the trial, except on the day she took the stand. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She spoke softly, with unnerving calm. "I loved my patients," she said. "I never wanted to hurt anyone. But I saw pain every day, people gasping, begging, dying slowly. We call it care, but it's cruelty. I only wanted to give them peace." The prosecutor leaned forward. "Peace or control, Mrs. Marks? You didn't ask your patients if they wanted to die." Karen's eyes hardened. They didn't need to. I could see it in their eyes. A shiver ran down my spine. The prosecutor's tone turned cold. "You decided that for them. You played God." Karen's lips trembled, not with guilt, but with conviction. Maybe God needed help. Gasps filled the courtroom. The judge banged the gavel. "Order!" The verdict came 3 weeks later. I was there that morning, the weight of every sleepless night pressing down on my shoulders. The jury foreman stood, voice steady. "We, the jury, find the defendant, Karen Marks, guilty of attempted homicide and criminal negligence resulting in death." Emily gripped my hand so tightly I felt the blood stop in my fingers. Karen didn't flinch. She simply closed her eyes and whispered something I couldn't hear, maybe a prayer, maybe defiance. The judge sentenced her to 25 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 15. As they led her away, she turned her head slightly, and for a fleeting second, our eyes met. Her lips moved soundlessly, forming the same haunting words she'd said in that interrogation room. "You'll thank me one day." Life after the trial wasn't easy. Even after I returned home, I couldn't escape the memory. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, gasping, half expecting the oxygen machine beside my bed to be silent again. Emily insisted on installing security cameras, even around the house. It took months before I stopped checking them every hour. I started therapy, not just for the trauma, but to understand why I couldn't stop thinking about Karen. My therapist, a calm woman named Dr. Monroe, told me, "You survived both her cruelty and her conviction. That's a difficult thing to reconcile. You're not haunted by her, you're haunted by what she believed." She was right. Sometimes, I'd catch myself wondering, what if she truly thought she was saving me? What if, in her mind, mercy and murder were the same thing? It terrified me how thin that line could be. Months later, I received a letter from the correctional facility. The envelope had no return name, but I recognized the handwriting instantly, sharp, precise, unmistakable. My hands trembled as I opened it. "Mr. Walters, I hope your lungs are stronger now. I think of that morning often. You were supposed to find peace, but maybe this is better. Perhaps you'll understand one day why I did it. The world keeps people alive for too long, forcing them to suffer. I couldn't watch it anymore. I know you hate me, but I don't hate you. You're free now, even if you don't realize it yet. Karen." Asterisk. I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer of my nightstand, beside my inhaler and a small photo of Emily. I never told her about it. That night, I sat by the window, watching the slow rhythm of the city lights outside. I thought about oxygen, invisible, vital, taken for granted. The air that fills our lungs, the breath that keeps us alive, the breath that can so easily be stolen. For a long moment, I simply breathed, deeply, deliberately, grateful for every second. I would never thank Karen Marks. But I would never forget her either. Because sometimes survival isn't just about breathing again. It's about learning to live with the silence that follows.